Hello investors. From time to time, we go through panic because of volatility in the market. Since 6 months ago, it was about the general elections in India. Then a few months ago, it was about the budget in India. Now it's whether US is dipping into a recession. 3 months later, it's going to be about the outcome of US elections. So our markets have ways of finding reasons to correct, and volatility is a part of life. But most people panic in these points of times and very often make the wrong decision. There are some who actually benefit from this. And I always wonder that what is it that sets them apart? One thing that I realize is that they all have a very good long-term sense of the market. In other sense, that what they have is an understanding of how markets are going to pan out, not this week, this month, but many years from now. So to address that issue, we decided to find a long-term target for the Nifty, a 20-year plus target. And that was a very, very brave call. But I think it is very important to understand the bigger direction of the market. And that's whenever these moments of volatility arise, we can use them as opportunities. So what we are trying to achieve in this episode is finding a long-term target for the Nifty, a 20-year plus target. When we were looking at India 20 years hence, and one word kept popping up, and that was AmritKaal. So you all know what AmritKaal is, but I'll just kind of run it again. AmritKaal is a term that's coined by the current government. India will achieve 100 years of independence in 2047. We got independence in 1947, 100 years makes 2047. And the 25 years preceding that is called AmritKaal. So essentially, AmritKaal has already started from 2022, and we are already 2 years into it. This phase is being defined as a golden phase economically, and this is when the country would see dramatic accelerated economic growth. The question is that if the country's economy is going to see accelerated growth, what is going to be the impact on our markets? And that's what we are trying to achieve today. We are trying to find the AmritKaal target, Nifty target for our markets. So let's get a little deeper into it. When we were researching AmritKaal, the vision that there's a document put out by Lakh. It's a very credible document, very detailed, where the key takeaway, the single takeaway was that by 2047, we want to achieve a GDP of $30 trillion. Now that's a very big number. Just to put it in context, our current economy is just under 4 trillion. So the move for 4 trillion to 30 trillion is a big jump. That looks like a big number, but if you divide it down, you will realize that India has to achieve a nominal GDP growth of 9.53%. This is not a very big number. It is achievable if we do the right things. The question is that, assuming that what is set out in this paper comes true, what is going to be the impact on the stock market? What is going to be the Nifty target? And that is something we decided to look into. These phases of accelerated growth, it's not that the first time someone is looking at it. This has happened in the past. Most great economies have ultimately had periods of economic growth. So we went and looked at multiple global markets and economies, and we have taken 3 examples. These examples will actually help us understand what the Nifty can be in 2047. The 3 economies are, of course, the US. Second is China, and third is Japan. And these are the correct examples to look at, because ultimately these are those large top 5 economies where India is also likely to be, or be in that elite club that there is. So let's look at each one of them, from them understand the lessons, and then apply it to the Indian markets to project where the Nifty will be in 2047. So first, the most important market in the world, the US. So what you see on your screen is the Dow Jones Industrial Average between 1980 and 2000. This is a 20-year phase, and this to some extent was a very important phase for the US. Mind you, US was already a very large, developed and leading economy in 1980. And to put it in context, in this phase, the Dow Jones Industrial Average moved from 729 to 11,750, which is a move of 1,512%. Again, I repeat that the US was not a small economy. It was the biggest economy, and the Dow was the premier index of the world. You can also say that elephants can dance. That was the kind of move that there was. In terms of the economics, between 1980 and 2000, the GDP growth, the nominal GDP growth in the US was 6.6%. And the index CAGR, which you see below, was 14.91. The important thing is that the index grew at 2.26 times the GDP growth. This is a very important number, the multiplier. We of course know that ultimately the GDP growth affects the movement of the stock market. But the important thing is to derive a multiplier. And what you see is a multiplier north of 2x. What were the factors that caused it? We went deeper and realized that there were 4 factors that caused this kind of great returns in the stock market. First were the demographics. This is the single largest factor that drives economic growth across markets. This was a phase of what you call the baby boomers. So there was a lot of increase in the growth rates of children in the 60s. These people came into the workforce in 80s, and this was a very young population termed as baby boomers. What are demographic dividends? Demographic dividends are that when the majority of the country's population is in the working age, they are not child or they are not aged, because the children and aged are dependent on the earners. When the maximum number or the highest percentage of population is in that space where they are earners, this is a point of demographic dividend. This was that phase of baby boomers in the US. To further improve on this, the US between 1981 and 1989 had president who was very pro-growth and liberalization, Ronald Reagan. In fact, the term Reaganomics was coined there, along with Alan Greenspan and the collapse of the Soviet Union. This was a very interesting phase for US politics. So you had very good demographics with the blessings of good economics from politicians who believed in growth. This led to an economic growth of 6.6%. However, the icing of the cake was that in 1978, the US pension plan, which is the 401k, allowed increased investment in equity markets. So not only were the economics good, you started seeing incremental flows from household savings into the stock market. And this is what resulted in this fabulous stock market run over 20 years. Next, China. This is the economic miracle of our current generation. What you see on your screen, 1991, index, a Shanghai composite of 95. And by 2007, it was 6,124. This is a growth rate of 6,346%. This is massive. What happened in China in this phase? In 91 to 2007, the GDP grew at 11.35%. So when I say that India will grow at 9.53, or that's what the projection is, it may seem unbelievable, but China has grown at 11.35% for a long period of 16 years. This obviously had an impact on the stock market. The index grew at 29.74%. Again, a multiplier of 2.62 times. So here also you will see that accelerated economic growth was more than rewarded by a 2x by the stock market. What were the factors? Again, we looked at those 4 factors that worked out. First is demographics. China had a boom and there was a very young population which came into the labor force. Second, you had a very big political reform. China before this was, if you remember, a communist country. There came a new chairman of the party, Deng Xiaoping, in 1978. He actually moved China away from communism towards opening up and capitalism. And this resulted in this phenomenal GDP growth of 11.35%. And more importantly, that a non-existent stock exchange came into being. In fact, in 1990, the Shanghai Stock Exchange came into being, and you started seeing household savings. This economic growth led to savings, and this savings came in the stock market. So this is the reason for this phenomenal growth in the Chinese market in this phase of 16 years. The third example we are looking at is Japan. Japan is a much longer case study. This is between 1950 and 1990. Nikkei was at 85 in 1950. Just to put it in perspective, 1950 was the end of Second World War, and Japan was decimated as a country. However, from 1950, where the Nikkei was 85, by 1990, that is 40 years, the Nikkei hit 38,957. This is a return of 45,732%. Very, very big numbers. And considering that it's a 40-year phase, it was a generation of wealth creation. What was it? What caused it? What were the economics? Between 1950 and 1989, Japan rebuilt post the disaster of the Second World War. You had an economic nominal GDP growth rate of 9.28%, which led to a stock market compounding at 16.55% for 40 years. Massive wealth creation. This is a 1.78x multiple. The four factors that we have listed out worked even in the case of Japan. First, post-war, there was an encouragement to have more babies, and you saw this growth in population. Number two, Japan moved away from rule by the emperor towards democracy. This was thanks to the US nudge. So in 1947, monarchy really kind of ended and Japan moved towards democracy. This resulted in a reprioritized national objective, which was nation rebuilding rather than wars and a lot of clan fights that there were. So you had a GDP growth of 9.28% for 40 years. That is a very, very big number. And most important, that the Japanese stock market reopened after World War, and this led to a big influx of capital from household savings, which came as a result of the GDP growth. So what you are seeing is that repeatedly countries have had periods of accelerated growth. And the interesting part is that the rewards to the stock market have been almost to a factor of 2x. So what you see on your screen is US, China, Japan. Accelerated periods of economic growth, but the rewards in the stock market have been to a factor of 2x. Now, coming down to India. As I want to refresh your memory, we were talking about AmritKaal at a 30 trillion economy. We were talking about a nominal GDP growth of 9.53. So if you use the same principle, that assuming our market or our stock market grows at 2x the GDP growth rate, that means we will have a market that compounds at 19%, right? 9.53 into 2 is 19.05. And this pure simple mathematics translates into a Nifty target of 13,24,000. I know you will not believe what I'm saying, but this is not what I feel. This is pure simple mathematics. I have met a lot of people and I've asked them to project stalwarts from the stock market. And what do you think the index will be 20-25 years from now? Most people have topped out at 5 lakhs. It's just that we do not believe what is the possibility. And this is not just some vague thought process. This is history repeating itself in country after country. So my target for the Nifty is 13,24,000. Obviously, you must be smiling and laughing and thinking this guy is crazy. Okay, we as Indians always tend to be skeptical about our government. That's the reality. But India as a country has done well. If you look at the last 20 to 25 years in the stock market, we have been a very, very good market. We have rewarded investors. So let's do a sensitivity analysis now. That assuming you think I am wrong, you're assuming you think the government is wrong, that we cannot achieve 9.53, especially on a big base. On a 9.53% GDP growth, the index target was 13,24,000. Let us assume the economy grows at 8.5. Even then, the Nifty target works to 8,88,000. Assuming you are even more pessimistic and say that at best we can grow at 7.5%, then also the Nifty target works to 5,97,000. And as I said, for most people I met, the most optimist target I got was 5 lakhs. So we are unable to visualize the possibilities that there are in our stock market. I, for one, is a strong believer that India is going to surprise on the upside. We have always had a lot of skeptics within the country. We have been great self-doubters. We have been panickers in times of difficulty. But ultimately, I do think that we will surprise people. And that is why my target or my choice tends to be the first. What is it that's working out for India? How are things shaping up? What is my understanding and observation right now? So what you will notice is that on your screen, the index from the COVID lows of 2020. India, as projected from 2024, which is now to 2047, would have a 9.53% nominal GDP growth as set out by the government. This amounts to a 19.5% CAGR in the index using a multiplier of 2. Why? Why do I think this is possible? The reason is that those 4 factors which I listed out in all the great booms, economic booms we saw in other countries are playing out in India. First and foremost, the most powerful thing is demographics. India has the youngest population in the world. 65% of the population is between 15 and 65. So when the most of the people are in the working age, that is demographic dividend. And mind you, we have a long runway because our median age is 28. So you assume that someone who's at a median age of 28 would continue to work for the next 20 to 30 years. So we have a long runway, and these 20 to 30 years overlap with the time frame that we are discussing about AmritKaal. AmritKaal is not just a number about 100 years of independence. It is the sweetest spot of our demographic dividend. Number 2 is that the politics in this country. You can clearly see that it's Modi 3.0 right now. The narrative has moved towards growth and development. The politics of this country may change. New political parties will emerge. New leaders will come. But when the youth of this country dominate the voting population, they will always vote for growth, development, and jobs. And that is why the biggest driver is demographics. Growth and development will remain center stage. And if that remains, India is unstoppable. We have projected a 9.53% growth. And the most important factor that we are witnessing in the last 2 years is the flows that are coming to capital markets. Indian markets for decades prior to this were dominated by FI flows. But you will notice that this whole new retail push, this whole SIP culture, the NPS flows are showing that the Indian market are more resilient than global markets, and they're showing characteristics of leadership. If you look at your graph, you will notice that from 2020 lows, which is the COVID lows, the markets had a nice rally up to 22. In 22, global markets corrected sharply, but India was that market that fell the least. This was also a year of record FII outflows, but it was domestic flows that ensured that we were the market that fell the least. When markets reversed in 22-23, we were also the first market to break out to lifetime highs. And this rally continues. You will see on a day-to-day basis, compared to most global markets, Indian markets fall less when global markets are falling. And when global markets recover, India is the first market to break out. This is the quality of leadership, and this quality of leadership comes due to the strength of domestic flows. I think that this is a very long runway, and this really makes me optimistic about Indian markets. Why I'm doing this, why I'm putting my neck out and giving such lofty targets. As I said, the aim of this video is to ensure that whenever volatility comes, you be the one that has faith in the country and is able to benefit from it. As I would like to summarize that this phase of AmritKaal, the objective set out by our planners is a $30 trillion economy, which is massive. Give and take a few, it still is a very big runway that we have. This is something we've seen globally play out in many economies. These have been golden phases. And as far as our market goes, by pure mathematics, by simple analysis, the target of 13,24,000 till 2047. On days when market falls or corrects, you will think I'm a fool. You may laugh at me, but that's fine. The aim, as I said, is to keep the larger goal in mind. This will ensure that we don't panic each time the market corrects. With that long video, I leave you for this month. Thank you.